Hello, hello,
Hey,
hello.
everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Earthlings. Welcome to the weekly Animal Rights Show.
It's been about 6 weeks, isn't it, now?
I think so, yes. Never mind.
That was my fault.
No, not at all.
As you can see, we have a special guest panelist, again, in the shape of Pattrice Jones. So welcome, Pattrice. So I think, Wendy, have you got the briefest of intros?
I just wanted to literally, I was going to read Pattrice's bio because that's in Pattrice's own words, and I don't want to have to make up things that she might not happy with me saying. So I just wanted to say that Pattrice is a co-founder of Vine Sanctuary, which is an LGBTQ-led farmed animal refuge that works for social and environmental justice, as well as animal liberation. And she's also a former tenant organizer and anti-racist educator with more than 40 years of activist experience. And Pattrice has also taught college and university courses in the theory and praxis of social change activism. As an ecofeminist scholar, Pattrice lectures and publishes worldwide on the interconnections among animal, human, and ecological matters. So welcome, Pattrice, and thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us about your latest book, A Bird's Eye Views. I'd love to ask you, first of all, as a way of introduction to you and your book, is to maybe just tell us why you decided to put this book out, and also, just as an extension of that, some of the essays kind of go way back into your writing journey, and what has been, when you were looking back at older essays, what do you feel has been your evolution in your writing? If you wouldn't mind starting with that.
Well, first, yes, but first, hello, and thank you so much for having me back. I'm always delighted to chat with you folks, and I look forward to seeing how the conversation goes. This new book, Bird's Eye Views, Queer Queries about Activism, Animals, and Identity, came about because I realized that a number of what I felt to be my stronger pieces of writing were hidden away in expensive or out of print or otherwise inaccessible anthologies. And so I had this idea in my head, I should get them all together at some point. And people were pushing me to do it as well. And what really gave me the push was about the, 17th time I was talking with someone about capitalism and started to reference something that I wrote in what is the lead essay in this book, the title of which I have now forgotten. And I realized no one's gonna buy that book just to read this essay because it's a 2-volume, very expensive set. And then I was like, okay, we just have to do this. And so it ended up being 33 essays written over the past 30 years. And my feelings in pulling it together were mixed. I was a bit stunned by the number of things there were, because there's a lot that's not in there. The shorter pieces are just a fragment of the shorter pieces that exist. And it was an interesting experience of sort of seeing my own evolution, especially looking back to the older pieces. And I found it somewhat gratifying to sort of trace the evolution of certain ideas, sort of see where I first wrote about them, and then see how they were elaborated over several iterations. But then there was also sort of a little bit of despair at looking at something that I wrote about, racist stereotyping more than 30 years ago, and thinking, oh, if I just changed the names of this commentary on what was news in the United States back then to some different names, we could write the same thing. That's how little has changed. So it's been a mixed experience for me putting it together. It's been lovely to hear people's reactions. And I'm very excited just to have the book out there. For me, I'm not a writer who enjoys writing. I do it because it's less ephemeral than just talking. It's a way to have my words out there doing work while I'm napping.
I love that.
And it's a way to, for me, it's all about the cross-fertilization of ideas. Like when I hear something new or I learn something new, and it clicks with something in my own head that I knew before, or some new connection happens between this new thing that I'm hearing and all the things I was already thinking, like, and I could feel the new information sort of clinking, clinking, clink, 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 clink through my system. I know that that's also what happens when I talk to people or people read my writing. And I love participating in that process of collective cognition. So I'm not putting out these essays as this idea, well, here's the answer to everything, or even here's the answer to anything. But like, here are some of the things that I've been thinking, and it might be useful for you to add these thoughts and these ideas and these insights and these imaginings to your own thoughts and ideas and imaginings, and then see how that shakes out within your own system.
We're really glad you decided to do it. And I wanted to make two comments about the book, not about the actual content, but about the fact that this book is published. One is that it's super affordable, and people can easily get it. They can get it wherever they are, because there is the PDF that they can get from Vine Sanctuary. And also that is an easy book to read. Not the ideas that you negotiate are not easy ones, but the way it's written, it's enjoyable and it's easy to understand. And one does not to have a bachelor, 2 MAs and a PhD in order to read the book. And I find it very gratifying.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, there are a few pieces that were written for more scholarly publications, and so they're a little bit more scholarly and have a bunch of footnotes. But there are a lot of pieces that were written for popular magazines and newspapers. And even when I'm writing in a more scholarly vein, I'm always trying to be as clear and accessible as possible.
We were saying before we came on air, Patrice, that one of the problems with the book is it never ends, in the sense that some of the essays are so well written, but also got a complexity that you need to read them more than once. We were saying that before, so that was very gratifying. For me, going back to the mothers with monkey wrenches was a great experience. I was familiar with that essay from the original book, which I've got sat here, and that was 20 years ago. And I just think that's a fantastic analysis from 4 different feminist positions of the ALF. So I do have a question about that, but that's for later. my general question was about the process as a writer. Did you alter anything from back then, or did you think that was cheating? Did you think, oh, blimey, I wouldn't write it like that anymore? You know, that kind of.
Right. So you're referring to an essay called Mothers with Monkey Wrenches, Feminist Perspectives on the Animal Liberation Front. Just for those who are listening in. And certainly for that one, I have had many thoughts since. And my thinking about that is still along the same lines. I don't disagree with anything, but certainly there are things that I would have phrased very differently today. I did not alter anything, even when I was cringing at some things that I would have said otherwise. The only piece that I altered at all was the piece on rent strikes as direct action. And that was because it was written for a local newspaper and it had a whole bunch of really strictly local things that wouldn't be interesting to the general reader. So in that instance, I simply cut a bunch of stuff, but I didn't reword anything. So yeah, that's what I did, because I wrote what I wrote. And I think that it's useful to be a person who changes their mind sometimes. And I think it's a useful skill to stay in touch with who you used to be.
Yeah.
Throughout the book, one thing was very apparent to me, that things do not happen in vacuums, and everything is related to everything. So we cannot solve problems by thinking, within the usual boxes. And I think this is, for me, was the main takeaway from the book. And the need to find more imaginative ways to think about or to experience things or to feel things in order to seek answers. And I'm thinking of one of the essays, the one called Beyond Despair, about the climate change. And I was really touched by this, because right now in Greece is summer, which is not normal at all. It's the first time I experienced this. It's above 23 degrees all the last month. People are going to the beach. We already have bushfires, something that does not happen usually until July. So the fact that the climate emergency is here is very apparent, at least at this corner of the world. And people still not think of climate change as something real, or as something that they have to take action for. And one of the things you mentioned in that essay is that people wait for larger numbers of other humans to do something, to take some action, and then will join. And I think this is true for almost everything, for every social problem, emergency, injustice. Someone may disagree with what's happening, but they would do almost nothing about it until they feel that they're part of a group. And I was thinking, is this a problem related to the so-called democracies of the Western world? The fact that through representative democracies, we have given all the decision-making power to professional politicians, and we have removed ourselves from the process so much that it's now alien to us. We feel that we're not entitled to take part in this conversation and the decision-making, and we almost beg governments and states for solutions or for small steps. And we don't realize that all these problems are our making, and we need to find the solutions, us, not somebody else, like 5 years later, or a professional politician. So is this related to the systems of government that they have put in place?
I love this whole series of things that you've just said. I've been making notes. So you started out referring to Beyond Despair, which is an essay I wrote almost 20 years ago about climate change. And in that essay, I did something else that I do throughout the book, and is another reason that I did put the book together, which is I try to share things that I have learned here at the sanctuary from other animals, because I feel that this is a unique standpoint that I have, having had the opportunity to learn so many things from non-human animals, that it's an obligation for me to share the things that I've learned from other animals with other humans. Taking those lessons and sort of republishing them in this new book is another way to make sure that the things that I've learned from non-human animals make their way to as many humans as possible. And I learned something super important from hens rescued from battery cages from egg factories about hope. And I share that in that essay. So I hope more people will read it, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. And I'm also glad that you said that for you, one of the main takeaways was sort of ecological thinking, not trying to not understanding how things are connected, rather than trying to solve problems in isolation. I think it is, but I really struggle when people ask me what are the main takeaways of your book. So I'm glad to have this one to tell them. And if anybody else wants to tell me what you think are the main takeaways of the book, I will be so happy to know it so that I can tell people what they are. And then I would just say that's a really interesting analysis of democracy that you've just given us. And it reminds me of the chapter on the book called Natural, called Free as a Bird, which is about what I call natural anarchism. And I really hope that people will read that. That is the, fourth iteration of an essay that I've given as a talk and that I've published several different times, but it's new. This is a new version, a new and so much improved version. And this one I really did because I've been rewriting it for years and years. So that is a new version of something that was published before. And I'm told that people like the previous version. That's great, but I really think this version is one of the things that I'm most happy about writing. And in it, there are critiques of government as government, including democratic government. And I really, really, really hope that animal advocates read this. It has a dual purpose. One purpose is encouraging people who are within anarchist circles to make sure they're thinking about animals and learning from animals in the larger than human world. But within animal rights, and even the phrase animal rights tells us that a lot of people are working within a presumption of government being as if governments as they are currently constituted is something natural. Whereas governments, as I put it in that chapter, there's a section called governments as gadgets. Governments are are aggregations of practices that humans have created to try and solve the problems that arise among humans when living together, or coming into conjunction with other groups of humans. And they are imperfect considerably. And so I can't begin to summarize that chapter, but I really hope that people who are working on the legal side of animal rights and are working for animal rights within existing systems of government have a look at that chapter. Of course, existing systems of government are what exist right now, and so we have to work within them. But I think it's important for us to understand what they are, understand that they are inherently violent and inherently inequitable, and will lead to problems such as the one that Nella just mentioned. So that when we're thinking about, well, what are we working for? Are we really working for this same worldwide system of governance, but animals have rights within it? Or are we going to think more broadly about what we want?
Wow, so much in there. Because I was literally about to jump in with something, one of my takeaways from the book as well, if you don't mind, but just coming back to the whole rights thing, because I think on this show, and we are very much, we're the animal rights show and we talk a lot about animal rights, but when with the rights that we think about, we don't really talk about legal rights as such. We think about the moral rights. And I don't know if this still factors into your thinking and the way you just framed that about governance, but I guess in a way, or the way I understand it, and I think perhaps the others maybe, I don't know, I'm just speaking for myself, but I understand it with that moral rights are separate to governance. They're just something that we're intrinsically born with in terms of the right to be respected as an individual and to not be harmed and to not have our bodies interfered with and to have this just this respect as an individual, no matter what body we are born into. And that's my understanding of rights, as opposed to legal rights that we codify into law that would then back up. Obviously, our laws don't protect us well as it is, the laws that we do have for humans or other animals. But I guess in a way, I'm thinking of the rights that I'm thinking of, the moral inherent rights, as being separate to that. What is your take on that? And do you differentiate between the two, or do you see that rights are, in the way that I've framed it there, are still compatible with the ecological thinking, if we think about other animals as individuals with these interests or these rights or these signposts around them saying keep off, keep out? Does that make sense, the way I framed that? But
and now I'm really second guessing myself, because a piece that didn't make it into the book is called "What's Wrong with Rights," and now I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have. But that was one that was going to have to be reworked in order to be republished. I think that there are a lot of different ways of thinking about rights. It's not like, any of our words, they mean what we collectively agree they mean. And so if what you mean by rights is things to which all beings are entitled, then regardless of anything else, then yeah, that's quite separate. That's quite different than legal rights. But then there's a way of saying, well, what are legal rights? Well, they're codified. They're agreements among humans. So then we get right back into the problems with the systems of governance that humans have created in order to, well, have they created them in order? I guess that's the thing, is that we are told that governments as have been exist in order to protect the rights of people, in order to ensure that everybody's rights are respected. We need governments, or so the story goes, to keep people from violating each other. Yeah. And so in democracies, at least, we're given to understand that this is the primary purpose of government. But if we look back at the history of governments as they're currently constituted, that's not how they arose. They didn't arise to protect people. They arose to protect property, and they arose violently. So it's a very complicated question that you've asked, and I think there probably is on YouTube a lecture of me talking for like more than an hour on what's wrong with rights. But my main aim is not to say, okay, well, here is the correct way to think about rights. I'm not interested in that at all. What I'm interested in, and I'm generally not interested in any of the fights that humans have about what particular sound symbols mean or don't mean. What I'm mostly interested in is opening up our thinking and making sure that we're seeing really clearly. And so when we think about rights, asking these kinds of questions like you're asking, well, what do I mean by that word? I'm not so interested in us coming to some agreement about what the sound rights will mean as I am in thinking through what it is we're trying to say when we use that word, and thinking through the question of whether the mechanisms we currently have that are supposed to protect what we think of as our rights, and which currently do not protect what we think of as the rights of animals, are even capable of doing what we want them to do. And if not, then what?
Mm-hmm.
So one reader of the book mentioned that it's just filled with questions. So I guess that's another way, Roger, that it never ends, because I'm taking the reader again and again and again through several processes that I've taken myself through of asking myself really hard questions and doing my level best to answer them, and mostly coming up with more questions. But I think that is useful, because that's
definitely
what unlocks imagination. And if there's anything that we need to solve all the crises that we're in right now, is imagination.
No, absolutely. And do you mind if I go straight on to, because sorry, I don't mean to hog the questions. That was only kind of a come back to your, but I wanted to tell you one of my.
Are you going to say the takeaway?
The takeaway. So one of my takeaways is throughout the essays and through your work generally, and I particularly loved the chapter Stomping with Elephants and Angry Emus, because you speak a lot about animal resistance to human oppression, and everywhere in your work, and also in The Power of Grassroots. In that essay, you make a particular point of saying that the other animals are the grassroots and we are their allies. And I just get this, and the way that you also get into the minds, or you try to get into the minds and see things from other animals' point of view, and the way that you, I think for me, I think if I can articulate it, sometimes you feel things, but you can't find the language, the sound symbols, as you so beautifully say, is I think you have a way of bringing down human hubris and bringing to light other animals and their perspectives and their wisdom and their knowledge and what they know, and how we can listen to them, and how they're already resisting, and they are the grassroots and we're their allies. And we're not the voice of the voiceless. They have a voice. You know, we need to listen to them. It's that for me is a beautiful, powerful thread that you don't always see in a lot of advocacy. And I love that. And I just wonder if you could say more on why this is so important for our movement.
It's essential, and I'm glad that was a visible thread for you. Just because a person decides in their head, I agree with animal rights, and goes vegan, that doesn't magically erase a lifetime of socialization into human supremacy. There's a joke that I sometimes make, which is, do you know what is the problem with vegans? And the answer is, they're humans. So vegans aren't any, unless vegans and animal rights advocates are making purposeful, concerted, mindful efforts to divest themselves of the presumptions of human supremacy, then they won't be much less hubristic than any other human. They'll just switch it over to being, we're the boss of the animals, to we're the boss of the animal rights movement. It's lucky for me that I've been living at a sanctuary all these 20 more years. And so I've had so many opportunities to see myself doing the most foolish things, and to see other animals roll their eyes at me, to hear ducks talking smack about me, and to hear there and at other times really catch a glimpse of myself from the perspective of other animals as just this blundering oaf who might at any moment ruin everything by taking a wrong step or deciding to be in charge. And so this is something else that I'm trying to communicate. And one of the reasons that I've done things like try and ask, well, what do pigeons know about people? They've been living in close proximity to us around the world, the broader pigeon and dove family, for as long as we've been in existence. If we could ask them, how would they describe humans? Would they say, oh yeah, they're the smart ones? I think not. I do not, in fact, think that they would say, oh yeah, they're the smart ones.
I bet there'd be some interesting sound symbols if they were speaking our language about us. Smart wouldn't be one of them.
So what would they think? But what would they think? What have they been, it's useful. It's often useful to hear how other people see you. And And so I've been trying to, well, how do other animals see me? How might they see humans more broadly? What can they tell us that we need to know? Not only to liberate animals from human hegemony, but to liberate ourselves from the folly of human supremacy, and to step down off of our self-constructed pedestals and look around and learn what we need to learn in order to save ourselves and the rest of the planet from the devastation that we have wrought. And again, I don't think, certainly no one essay in that book is gonna do that, but we need to learn to be different, and we can. Humans are amazingly plastic in the sense of malleable animals, capable of all sorts of different ways of being in the world. And so I don't know what we'll come up with. I can't know. I'm just one person. I can't know what we're going to come up with. I wish I could. I wish I could write a book and say, look, here's what we learn if we all stop being so hubristic and we learn what we can from other animals. I don't know. But I know that we need to do that collectively in order to have a hope of collectively doing things differently in the way that other animals need us to do them differently.
This brings to mind the Mockingbird essay and the intersection between speciesism and ableism. When I was reading it, I made a note because at some point I cannot really quote. I'll try to express it correctly. That it's not enough. You're right that it's not enough to accept that we are not superior to other species, but we have to dismantle the idea that ability equals worth. Mm-hmm. And this is a narrative that's very prominent within the animal rights movement. Mm-hmm. Because in most cases, advocates are very willing to state that we are not superior because we are human. But then we go on and trying to convince people not to kill pigs, for example, because pigs are the third, most intelligent animal on the planet. And I don't think that maybe this is not only to do with the intelligence or what we perceive as intelligence, but also the fact that in order to convince others, we try to make them see how similar other animals are to us. And I understand and I've done it. And the motive behind that is always good. It's like saying, don't otherize other animals and don't otherize other humans. But the truth is that many species are very different to us, and that leads to a logical conclusion that are less worthy when we state things like that. So, in your opinion, what's the best way to make others think, non-vegans think about other animals as worthy?
Right. So this is a very important question. And I can only say a little bit here. Right, because there's a whole essay in the book about it. And there's a whole chapter in my book, The Oxen at the Intersection, about ableism. And I just gave an hour-long talk on it at the Disabled Vegan Expo, the recording of which is now online, I believe. And just for the record, Vine Sanctuary is currently working on a briefing paper for the movement about ableism and once that's finished, we're about at the point where we're getting feedback from other vegans with disabilities about what's in it and what needs to shift. But once the editing and proof process is done, then we will be distributing that to both to international, national, small grassroots organizations. We'll make it available, not just make it available, but we'll actually send it to people. And we're actually going to use our connections in the movement to make sure it gets to people and they are motivated to read it, because this is not something that we can afford to do, to be ableist. One, because it's wrong, but secondly, I mean, people with disabilities are about a quarter of the population. So if the animal rights movement is running around insulting people with disabilities, that's not really helping animals. So your question though is, it's an interesting one here. And as you can hear from my stuttering, I too am a person with a disability. So the very common tactic is to say, well, don't eat pigs, because, they're smart. And so when you do that, you're not only implicitly saying, well, they're like us in this particular way, and that's what makes them valuable, but you're also saying that certain cognitive capabilities are what make a being worthy of moral regard, worthy of self-determination, worthy of being allowed to live their lives. And so do you mean then that, I don't know, people who can do calculus deserve more rights than people who only can do simple addition? Are you suggesting that people with cognitive disabilities should have fewer rights? Probably not. You're just trying to make this argument for this pig, right? And so I think that it's possible to say any of the things that you want to say are true, because it's a wrong stereotype to assume that other animals aren't conscious, to assume that other animals don't have memory, to assume that other animals don't make tools or have language or any of the other things that people say about other animals. Those things are stereotypes, and they're wrong, and it's right to counter stereotypes with the truth. You just have to avoid countering the stereotype with the truth in a way that suggests that capability is what makes somebody worthy of moral regard. So you could say something like, well, pigeons can do math too, but of course, no math ability isn't what makes somebody worthy of rights. Or, well, of course, pigs, as it happens, pigs have this capability. But of course, I'm not saying that people's rights should depend on their cognitive abilities. That would be ableism. And see, so right there, you're not only not being ableist, but you're letting them know that if they are thinking, I can do this to animals because they're dumb, well, actually, they're not only being speciesist, they're being ableist. And so you're essentially making an anti-ableist argument for animal rights. And all it means is adding a phrase or two to what you would have said anyway.
Right. I want to try and pull a few strands together, if I may, as a good sociologist. But I'm actually in a dilemma here, because I had three questions that I particularly wanted to ask. I wanted to ask a question based on selfies and sanctuaries, which is a great little piece, but very important. And I was going to ask that about critical thinking. And then there was the moving the past of the welfare abolitionist impasse. And I wanted to ask a question about movement reflexivity. But I think I'm going to go back to Mother's with monkey wrenches, if I may. And the reason for that, well, funny enough, I don't know whether you know, Pattrice, but that book is only 20 years old. Yours is the only essay which mentions the word veganism, right? So that's quite interesting in itself. I looked in the index. I've got it right here. But you said this: total animal liberation will not be achieved until both human and non-human animals are free. And then, at a minimum, you argue, animal liberationists should avoid contributing to anyone else's oppression. But at best, we should forge alliances with social justice activists and structure actions, our actions, in order to illuminate connections between speciesism, racism, militarism, and economic exploitation. Now, I don't know whether you are familiar with the new growing phenomena. I don't think it's very massive at the moment, but it is growing, of animals-only veganism, because they would argue against what you said in that essay, because their basic idea is that we should stay in our lane and we should not have anything to do with anything else except privately.
Yeah.
And so in terms of alliance politics, they're kind of opposed to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's nothing new. And it's silly. And you see it in literally every movement. There are people who are arguing for a close focus, not just a close focus. No, I'm not going to. They're not arguing for a close focus. They're arguing for a willful refusal to attend to the social and material contexts in which the problem they are trying to solve exists. They're trying, and it never works, to take a problem, some social problem, some problematic behavior of humans, and they're trying to solve that problematic behavior of humans without attending to the social and material contexts in which that problematic behavior occurs. And so you're trying to solve a problem without attending to the causes of the problem. Everything that humans do to animals, humans do in particular social and material contexts, which structure the choices that are available to them, which structure how they think about the world. And so whether the problem is we're trying to solve is people eating animals or not recycling or driving fossil fuel cars or harming other humans in some patterned way, we're not likely to solve it if we're willfully refusing to look at what might be the most important determinants of the behavior we want to stop. So I feel like there was something else I wanted to say, but I sort of lost it in my sentences. But this is the heart of the matter. Oh, right. Now I know. This actually goes right back to human supremacy. So this is essentially a human supremacist way of trying to do animal rights. It's human supremacy So human supremacy not only tells us lies about animals, it tells us lies about ourselves, right? When I was saying, how will the pigeons see people? So it's not just that human supremacy says, well, animals are inferior. They also say, well, humans are superior. And they don't just say, well, animals aren't very cognitively competent. They're also saying humans are supremely cognitively competent. And a key element of human supremacy is a fake independence, an idea that humans are separate from the world, not just superior to, but in order to be superior to the rest of the world, you have to be separate from the rest of the world. So there's this false independence, this idea that we're just like disembodied brains. And this is linked to all of the, this is actually a huge pattern of human thinking that is related not only to speciesism, but to sexism and racism and other forms of injustice. This idea that we are independent and minds. And so really all you got to do is come up with some good rational arguments, and this will fix the problem. In fact, humans are animals. We're social animals. As social animals, our very bodies are co-created by our social circumstances. We were talking before about the sound symbols that we call words. Right? Well, how do you learn words? You learn words from people. You as quiet as it's kept, every one of us initially grew in the body of another person. And when we were born, we were entirely dependent on either that person or some other people for everything. And what we heard from those people taught us we had these things, these bodily sensations that we adults call emotions. And we learned how to categorize them and come up with words for them from these other people. We are deeply structured by our social circumstances. And we're not independent from our physical circumstances either. If you think you are, just try to not take a breath. You can't. You have to breathe. And where do you get the oxygen? From trees, from algae. Everything that allows you to exist is outside of yourself. And so I know I'm getting a little existential or something here, but my point is that every choice that a person makes is an admixture of choice and circumstance. Your circumstances, including your social and physical circumstances, determine what choices you're even able to make, determine what you're even able to imagine. And so we can't possibly solve a millennial-long problem like human exploitation of non-human animals by ignoring all of the factors that lead people to be who and how they are. If we understand what kind of animals we are, then we'll do better. What kind of animals are we? We're social animals who are deeply motivated by social cues. We're material beings who are unable to do things that are physically impossible for us to do. I know that sounds like a truism, but that's something to keep in mind. We tend to do the things that are easiest for us to do. There's lots of things that we know actually are true about us. And emotion. Oh my goodness. Emotion is a much stronger driver of behavior. than rational calculation. And so, you know, I hear that these people are saying this, but it's folly, and it's actually supremacist folly.
What's really interesting, Pattrice, is you picked up on you said that this kind of attitude is based in human supremacy, and yet, funnily enough, that's the attack given by those kind of activists. They will say, you're bringing human issues into a movement that's for other animals. You are a human supremacist. You're basically becoming an all lives matter kind of person in the movement. And I wonder what your take on that is. What would you say? For example, there was a lot of activists a few years ago when the Black Lives Matter campaign and the George Floyd incident and all of that kind of blew up. A lot of animal advocates were saying that they'd been told they must put a black screen on their social media, and if they weren't a real vegan, they weren't a real animal advocate, because you have to stand in solidarity, for example. And there was a lot of pushback, a lot of like, why are we bringing this human issue into the movement? Can other animals not have their own movement? It's the only one they've got. It's the only way. It's the only place that they are.
Are they the leaders? Yeah. Who's deciding?
Mm-hmm.
Look, there's so for one, my advice is ignore that. Ignore it. Just go back. Do your work. Do your work. Don't worry about people telling you not to do your work. Really. Second, oh my goodness, there's such a long ass history of essentially gaslighting of activists who are trying to attend to multiple things at one time by I can't even, I'm sorry, I got mad. And so, but I'm just here to tell you, this is, you know, we can look at the history of like the oh my gosh, like in the 1960s in the United States during the anti-war movement, right? So women who spoke up about being sexually assaulted or harassed or harmed or discriminated against by men in the movement were told that they were racist for even bringing that up when people in Vietnam are being bombed. Like there's just this long history of that kind of behavior. And I think, I guess we're back to human supremacy here. Really, I think, because who you don't hear bad-mouthing other activists for doing things they're trying to do? People who listen to other animals. Like, you might hear me say, I would like you to think about this as well. But like, if you're out there using rational argumentation to get people to go vegan, I don't think that's not the solution, but it's one of the things we need people to do. Do it. So anytime that people are like complaining, I just say, don't let that steal your energy. Don't let that steal your energy. Just do the work you need to do, and do not worry about. And you can tell by there's a different. I'm not saying ignore critiques, but critiques always have a really different tone. Like, I don't want you ignoring people who are saying, hey, you need to pay attention to this thing too. Or wait a minute, this thing you're doing might have that unintended consequence. You need to listen. to those things. But when it's people complaining to you that, you know, what you're doing is bad or wrong because it's not the exact same thing they would do, then, you know, look at my chapter on called Queer Eye on the EA guys and understand the essentialness of a diversity of activist tactics. You think that some tactic that other people are using is not gonna be good enough? Okay. Hope that you're wrong and that whatever they're doing is going to make a great impact. But unless you've got like solid evidence that something they're doing is literally going to hurt somebody, human or other, animal or otherwise, just wish them well and go do your own work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really agree with that. I really agree.
I'm conscious of the time. What do you want to do?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Because guess what? There's an eclipse coming.
Oh.
So I got to go soon.
I saw a reference to eclipse on Facebook.
Yeah,
I didn't understand. Yeah.
Yeah. The eclipse is going to be starting pretty soon.
Oh, that's 10 questions I didn't get to ask.
We'll have to get now. I'm okay for now.
No, I'm only kidding, because we do try and stick to the hour, but I just know, but all of us, I can see we're all sitting here with like 100 questions.
So what's most important? And I'm sorry for going on and on and on in response to questions.
No apology needed.
This is great. I just wanted to mention briefly one other theme that it surfaces again and again within the book, and this is the link between capitalism and patriarchy and the body, and what we are if we are not our bodies, and how our bodies are controlled. And I wanted to mention that something about your writing. There are whole paragraphs where you have been able to transport the reader to certain places. One of them for me was inside the hen cage of the essay, I Know Why the Caged Bird Screams. Very powerful stuff there. And you've written that in order to break the spirit, one has to control the body. And I was thinking, how true is this about other animals, and how true is about women, and how is this happening again and again and again everywhere in the world, especially during conflict, but in everyday life. So if you could, talk a little about that.
I just think you said it. But you want me to say more about it?
I want to ask about the ways we think about the bodies, not only as about what are what we are not.
Yeah.
Are we limited to our bodies, and is all we? Because I feel that this is all we are. We are our bodies, and
we are our bodies, sort of a newer piece that didn't make it into the book, but just came out in the or coming out in May, is the Routledge Companion to Gender and Animals, and I have a essay in that where I talk about how so this way of thinking about the world, which includes speciesism, is a way of thinking about the world that sort of divides it into binaries, human and animal, nature and culture, male and female, etc. And then and treats these binaries as though they are separate and opposite one another. And one of those is mind and matter. and then not only treating things as though they're separate and opposite from each other, but one is better than the other, right? And this is what I'm saying here is an ecofeminist analysis that's been talked about by Val Plumwood, Greta Gard, many others. Okay, so then it's mind over matter, male over female, human over animal, etc. And these all link up together, right? Men are presumed to be, it's not just mind over matter, but thinking over emotion. And then you hear the stereotypes where men are presumed to be more rational than women. Humans are presumed to be more rational than animals, etc. And mind over matter is huge here, and in it is this assumption. And I think it comes in part from the fact that for us, we don't feel, we physically do not experience sensations associated with the brain activity that creates our feeling of self, our consciousness, etc. We don't have nerves that alert us to all of the machinations going on in our brains that are creating this sensation of consciousness. And so it feels disembodied. We feel like we're a self in a body. And within Western cultures, at least, this self treats the rest of the body the same way that humans treat nature, as though it were lesser than and just a resource to be used, and as though this consciousness is independent, when of course it's entirely dependent. It is the body, in the same way that we're entirely dependent on the biosphere. None of us are independent, and so I think that any work that helps people to be in their bodies and not think of themselves as transcending their bodies is aligned with our work to encourage humans to not imagine themselves to be transcendent above nature or outside of nature or above nature, right? I'm part of this forest that's outside my door. I'm breathing the exhalation of the trees right now. All the stuff that's going on underground is what's making it possible for the tree to be alive, which is making it possible for the tree to photosynthesize, which is making it possible for the tree to respire, which is making it possible for me to breathe. I may not be aware of all that all the time, but that's what's true. And so anything that we can do to bring us back into our bodies, I think is going to be useful, particularly if we maintain an awareness of the utter dependency of our bodies upon the larger than human world. I hope that was what you were looking for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
It kind of ties in as well with another of the common threads through your work and ecofeminism on a more wider scale, is that importance of place as well. So with the body comes the place and the context, I guess, because as in your book Oxen at the Intersection, I think you led the book with where is the body, and at first I was thinking, what did she mean, where is the body? Because I thought it was going to be like a mystery, and of course it was a mystery, but then there was much more to that as you expanded into that where is the body. That was something that really struck me, and I've never forgotten it, and I always try to come back to that. Where is the body in terms of that context and place? And again, that's another of my big takeaways.
Super important question to ask yourself all the time as an activist. Where's the body? Where's your body? Where are the bodies of the people who are doing the things that you want them not to do, or not doing the things that you wish they would do? Where are their bodies? What are the influences on their bodies, and whether their bodies are doing or not doing the things you want or don't want them to do? Yeah, super important.
And just to tie that in with something, because you talk very much about ecological perspectives, and that everything is connected, and we're all connected. We're all part of this biodiversity, and we're probably entangled in ways we don't even understand. Of course, as humans, we think we understand everything, but we don't. There's so much going on that we don't even understand and know. And
we don't even understand gravity. Go on.
No, don't. I have a question about plants. I'm not ashamed to admit I'm a bit of a hippie and a bit of a tree hugger, and I have an absolute awe for trees, plants, all of this stuff. As an animal, so-called animal rights activist, however we want to see it, animal liberation activist, an animal advocate, whatever I am, I do feel like I'm included, and I love to feel and see these connections. I feel that in a lot of advocacy, though, we tend to talk about as you have coined the phrase, I believe, it's one of yours, the larger than human world.
Oh, we tend to. People, I just picked it up. Somebody else.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the larger than human world, I do feel like as advocates, we tend to talk about the larger than human world in nature as if it's a resource for other animals, because we are advocating for sentient beings, as we should. But I just wonder how, and I don't even know if I'm articulating this question very well, because it's just lots of little thoughts coming into my head and energy in my brain, but just how can we kind of advocate ecologically for all of these connections, including where we live and our bodies are and other animals' bodies are, and what we rely on to survive, including plants, of course, who are important in their own right. But how can we make a distinction, or do we need to make distinctions? Or because I don't like to advocate as they're just resources, because they're not, and but I also want to feel that I want to advocate for sentient life as well, in a slightly different way. But I don't know. It's messy, I suppose. But
no. I think you have an intuition, which I think is correct, that what you're calling sentient beings, but I'll just call animals, have feelings, including the feeling of pain. And you want to minimize pain. Yeah? You want to minimize suffering. So far as we know, while plants do perceive the world and engage in calculations that are clearly the plant form of cognition, plants don't seem to have emotion. And so it's an entirely reasonable thing to be advocating to end the unnecessary suffering of animals while still eating lettuce, for example. You're not causing pain by eating lettuce. Now, you might be, if you're eating lettuce from, I don't know, a pesticide-laden farm where the farm workers are abused, then yes, by eating lettuce, you're causing suffering. But we'll say it's lettuce that you grew veganically in your own garden. The lettuce is not experiencing pain when you break off a leaf. It's just not. But two things I want to add to this. One is that all animals depend on plants. You want to help animals, you got to help plants too. We're all of us, with the exception of some underwater animals whose morphologies we really don't fully understand. All animals require oxygen, which is made by plants, and also need to eat. And the start of the eating is the plants. So if we're concerned about animals, we need to be concerned about plants. The other thing I want to say is that just as I've tried to look through the viewpoints of other animals to see what we can see about humans, there's somebody, Stefan Mancuso, who has tried to do this with plants. And we read one of his books for book club. It's called The Nation of Plants. And if you want to wobble your own human supremacy, get this book, The Nation of Plants. What he does is he imagines that plants as a nation go to the human United Nations to tell the United Nations what it needs to do. It's super easy to read. It was written in Italian, but it's translated into English, super fast, easy read. And if you read that book, then you'll understand we have to include plants in our remit. And look, this gets us back to the whole, you must only focus on this, that, or the other. Look, none of us can focus on all the things. You do have to choose where you're going to put most of your energy. Nobody is saying that everybody has to pay attention to everything all at once. That's literally impossible. It's a matter of simply being mindful of all the other problems and making sure, doing your best to not make any of the other problems worse while you're working on the problem that is your main focus. And it's also a matter of understanding that this problem that you're working on is probably linked to a lot of other problems. And the better that you understand those links, the better your analysis of the problem is going to be. And the better that your analysis of the problem is, then the better the strategies that you come up with to solve the problem are going to be. Oh, and I think that's the takeaway of the book.
Excellent.
And with that, we should not forget to inform people how they can get the book.
Yes. You can. It's Bird's Eye Views by Patrice Jones, 2 T's in Patrice, and you should be able to get it anywhere that books are sold. But if you cannot, then you can just go to vinesanctuary.org, and right on the front page there's a banner about the book. You can click on that and you can see links to various places to buy it, including, if all else fails, a link to buy the ebook directly from Vine.
And it's so worth it. It's juicy. It's I find, if you don't mind me fangirling just for a minute, Patrice, so I find your work really satisfying. It's kind of, it pulls together so many threads of things that I think about and talks about issues that are kind of scary to go there sometimes, but you go there and it's kind of satisfying in a, when you're thirsty, you want to have a drink kind of way, because it just covers so many different juicy, difficult topics in such an accessible, beautifully written, imaginative, creative way. And your work really inspired me to do my own writing. I think I did share with you as well. And so some of what I have read has inspired some of my own writing. And actually the essay that Nella mentioned, the I Know Why the Cage Birds Scream, has also inspired a new little seed of a thought for a different bit of writing for me. So yeah, it's the ripple effect. So it's
that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm always looking for, is that ripple effect. And I want to thank you all so much for having me on, because that's helping that ripple effect. You mentioned before the book's affordable. We did it that way on purpose. We really just want to get the ideas out there. By the way, it's published by Vine Press, so anything that resembles a profit goes to the sanctuary. But what we did, price it as affordably as we could, so that, because we just want to get it out there. And thank you so much for helping us to get it out there.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us your time, Patrice. Thank you also for all the people who are still with us. We always appreciate that you stay with us, and we shall attempt to be back at least within a month.
Yes.
Won't we, Wendy and Ella?
Yes. We'll do our best.
Folks. So we're going to say goodbye and see you again pretty soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.